And I'm glad to be back here. And in today's session, I'm going to show you how to create a program that is affiliated with a game. So you're going to learn some techniques on how to use Scratch to create a game of your own. But before we go into that, I'm going to ask you to, if you haven't already created an account on Scratch, I would say click on join here and go ahead and sign up for an account. It's free, it's easy to sign up, and it's better that you save all your projects and all the work in Scratch, and you can also publish it if you make some really cool stuff that people would love and appreciate, and you can share a lot of content with the Scratch community. So I'm going to sign in here with my account, and we're going to get started in a minute. All right. So here we go, and on the top, once you sign in, you'll see this is my profile, and I can see all the things. But here is where my stuff exists, right? This is my stuff here, and I can come into my stuff, and you'll see that maybe my kids have been doing some crazy stuff, and they've put a lot of junk in here. So I'm going to get rid of all that. And today what we're going to do is to create a rendition of a maze runner program, right? So I'm going to start a new project, and we'll give it a name and we'll get started. So we'll call this project as maze game. Okay, and now we don't need this particular sprite, and you've seen this all along. Now you can always use the sprite if you want to. In this particular case, I'm going to use the sprite just for giggles, right? So I'm going to reduce the size down to some sizable number, maybe like 25, because I want a small kitty running through my maze. Now that may be too small, so I might increase it a little bit, maybe make it like 35 or 40 points. And let's see, yeah, that should be good, or I can always reduce it later if I need to. So probably go with 30. So that's that. I'm gonna create a new sprite now. My first step in creating a game, I want this sprite, I want this cat, Tomcat, to walk through the maze. And to do that, I'm going to create a background sprite. So I'm going to choose a sprite, and instead of choosing a sprite this time, what I'm going to do is to paint a sprite. So I'm going to create a sprite here, and you see once I do that, I get this palette here, and on this palette I can create a maze. And it's very easy to create a maze. All you have to do is draw your own maze on a piece of paper, and then come and recreate it over here, and make sure that you add it give it as much complexity as you want to, but without making it overly complex, right? So this is, I'm going to do this, I'm going to stop for a minute, and I'll show you once the maze is built. Okay, all right. Okay folks, so I am back now, and you'll see that the maze is ready. And now that the maze is ready, the sprite is ready, and it's got a little bit of a three-dimensional look to it, but that's on purpose. You'll see that we need to put a target. Now the starting for this maze is in here. It goes in through there, and then the target has to be here. So to choose the target, we will choose another sprite, and we can make anything the target, like a bunch of bananas, an apple, in this case we're going to make it a cake. All right, so let's use a cake as the target, and let's once again reduce the size of this cake. Let's make it whatever, 50. That should work. And now I'm going to position this cake at the target location, which is right where it is. I'm going to position this right here at the starting point, which is, that's where the starting point is. And now I have my target in position, I have my maze in position, and I have my cake in position. The goal is for Tomcat to walk through this maze and make his way to the cake. Okay, so that's what we're going to program now, and we're going to start by programming um, the cat. And the way we do that is by using the same controls. We have controls, we have events, we have motion, and we have looks, and we can use a little bit of sound and text and all that stuff to make it a little more jazzy, right? So I'm gonna I'm gonna hook something up, and then I'm gonna be right back, and I'll show you the kind of things that you should be using to make this sprite. So one of the things we're going to do in order to make the Tomcat move is to use the arrow keys. We're going to use the left, right, up and down arrow key. And how we're going to program it is by starting with the events button, right? The events, click on events button, and then let's drag when space key is pressed. So instead of space key, I'm going to switch this to when, up arrow, down arrow, right or left arrow, right? So in this case, I'm going to write the condition for a right arrow movement, right? So when right arrow key is pressed, what I want the sprite to do is to move just a few steps forward. So maybe it is, move 5 steps, move 10 steps, something that makes it move in the right direction, right? So I'm going to use short movements here, and in this case I'll probably use 4 steps. And now that's good enough to make the sprite move to the right, right? And now we're going to use some other techniques to make it work the way we expect it. So here we insert a point in direction um, command, and the reason why we need to do this is to make sure that our sprite is moving to the right. Now when you press the right arrow key, it does not guarantee that the sprite will move to the right. Yeah, you're just moving it by 4 steps and it could move in any direction, right? So in order to make the sprite move in the direction that you want it to move, all you have to do is point it in the direction that you want it to move and then move 4 steps, right? So this makes it go in the right direction. So you'll see the sprite moving through the maze. As I click this, he moves in the right direction, right? Now, what we also want to make sure the sprite does is when he gets to the edge, we want him to bounce. We do not want him to go through the screen, and we do not want him to stay stuck in that position, right? So to do that, we once again rely on the same thing. If on edge, bounce, and then we can always rotate it back by saying set rotation style left to right, right? So if he gets too far um, in a particular direction and starts to get to the edge of the screen, then he would bounce right back and go the other way, right? So that's essentially the program, right? So we made the sprite move in the direction that we wanted him to move, and that is by using just the right arrow key. Now, one other thing we want him to do is we do not want the sprite to walk through walls. Like for example, if he is here and we hit the right arrow key, we do not want the sprite to do this, because this is a maze and he shouldn't be able to go through the walls of the maze. Now, to do that, we can use other types of commands, and I'll show you this cool technique that you can use to manage and control the direction and movement of the sprite, right? So there are events, and there's plenty of events that you can use. So the event that we're going to use in this case is the if then event, right? If the sprite is touching a wall, we want it to do something else. We do not want it to go through the wall, right? So we are going to say if the sprite, and we go to the sensing button. The sensing button tells you that you can sense what the sprite is doing. For example, there is touching. Is it touching a color? Is it touching some other object, right? In this case, we're going to use the touching. And I'm going to stick this touching right in between here. Like in that, you see that white box that comes in between the if then? That's where I'm going to put the sensing command, that if touching, and I'm going to select sprite 2. For example, this is sprite 1, the maze is sprite 2, and cake is sprite 3. So sprite 2, when the mouse, when sprite 1 is touching sprite 2, then what do I want it to do? I can say things like, I can easily say, oh, I hit the wall, or tough, tough luck, or I can make it, give out a sound because it's a cat. For example, I can say instead of think, I can also say. I can say, oh, the wall, oh, the wall, right? And I can say this for a short time. I don't want it to be saying this for 2 seconds every time it runs into a wall, so I'll probably do it for 0.25 seconds. And I can also make it use a sound. So I'll go click on the sound button here, and I can say play sound, or I can say start sound, or I can say something like I can definitely say start sound. And when I do that, it's going to give out a sound like meow, right? So now you see, this is how you introduce conditional logic into your code. You use an if then condition, and then if that condition occurs, it is going to go through this loop here, and it's going to execute these two commands, which is it's going to say oh the wall for 0.25 seconds, and it's going to give out a meow sound, right? Or you can even reverse the order of this so that you get the sound first and then the text, and then the text stays for a little bit and then it moves. So let's take a shot and see how this works. So for example, if my sprite is here and I execute this, I'm going to hit the right arrow key. It's going to go through the wall, right? And it's going to make that sound. Now, what's happening here is my sprite is still going through the wall. Despite saying, oh, the wall is going through the wall. So I'm missing something. What am I missing here? What I'm actually missing here is the fact that I do not want my sprite to keep moving in this direction. I want it to reverse the direction, right? So to reverse the direction, I'm going to use a command here to say move, and I'm going to use, this is the cool part, is that you can make it go backwards by using a minus. So I'm going to use -4 steps. So when I do that, the sprite now, you'll see, is not able to go through the wall, because every time it hits the wall, it's going to say oh the wall, and it's going to bounce right back, right? And you cannot hear the sound right now because I'm not running it. My speakers are cut off, but you can hear the sound when you actually execute the real program. So every time it hits the wall, it's going to say meow, and will sound really cool. So now we have pretty much put in the code that we need to help the sprite go through this maze using the right arrow key. Now, what are we missing? We're missing the same thing when we want, and here's another thing you want to test your sprite with, is to make sure that there's enough room to move. You do not want your sprite getting stuck in narrow walls, right? So make sure, if you do get stuck, to reduce the size of your sprite and make it, something where it is not going to be stuck going through these walls. The sprite has to always be able to go through the walls, and it has to be smaller than the wall itself, right? So do be careful and make sure that you can control the movement of the sprite. Now, with this said, I'm going to ask you the question. Now, with the right arrow key defined, what are the other keys that we have to define? It's fairly easy. You have to define the left arrow key, which should make the sprite move left. You have to define the down arrow key, which should make the sprite move down, and you have to define the up arrow key, which should make the sprite move up without bouncing into the walls or going through the walls. So all we're going to do is copy the same piece of code, change the direction in which the sprite moves, and we're going to repeat this 4 more times or 3 more times with those respective keys, right? So that's easy, and I'm going to add that piece of code, and I'll show you exactly what it looks like once I'm done. Okay, so now we're going to add the left arrow key command, right? And to do that, I selected the left arrow key here when key pressed, and I'm going to do something really cool here. So I want you to watch this carefully. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to press here, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to duplicate this code. So when I duplicate this code, you see it creates a copy of the code that I can easily associate with the left arrow key. Then all I have to do is change the things that I really want to change. For example, here I want the sprite to go in the other direction, and I want it to do everything that else that it does, right? So practically that's pretty much what I need it to do, and with that I should be able to move the sprite in the reverse direction when I press the left arrow key. So right arrow key, move this way, left arrow key, point in the other direction and move this way, and when you hit a wall, don't go through the wall, just bounce back, right? So you can't go through a wall. And so now you see the code. I was simply able to copy the code easily and move it from the right to the left. And I'm going to repeat this two more times with the up and down arrow keys, and you'll see in a minute how that looks. Okay. Okay folks, I'm back now, and you'll see that what I've done here is simply duplicated the code. I took the right arrow, the left arrow, and I duplicated it two more times, this time with the down arrow key and then with the up arrow key. And the only things that I changed really in this whole block of code is the direction. So I clicked here and down arrow, meaning the sprite would have to move downwards, and that's fairly straightforward, right? And that's all I changed here. Between this was 90 degrees, this was minus 90, which means it moves leftwards. This is 90 degrees forward when I press the right arrow, which means it's moving forward. And then when I press the down arrow key, it has to move downwards, which is 180 degrees pointing downwards. And here's the interesting thing: when you want it to move upwards, then you have to be careful, because it's not about moving this way, it's really about moving this way. So it has to be going straight up, and in order to do that, you practically rotate this all the way up 360 degrees, and that gets you back to the 0th degree, right? So it's 0 degrees and it's moving up. Now that I've added all the 4 blocks of code, your sprite is pretty much ready to move. So I'm going to show you how. With the right arrow, he's going right. With the left arrow, he's going left. With the down arrow, he's going down, right? When I press the down arrow key, he's going down. And when he hits a wall, he's going to bounce, right? And when I press the up arrow key, he's going to go up once again. So there you go. Like, I've got all the 4 motions combined into Tomcat. And now the only thing that's left is the objective. The objective here is to get the cake. And when the kitty reaches the cake, he should celebrate. He should have fun, and that's the end of the game. So we need to add some code here in order to figure out if the kitty has actually achieved the cake, right? So to do that, we're going to add a little bit of conditional logic once again, right? So what we're going to do here is to see if we can make the kitty reach the cake, and if it reaches the cake, then what should it do? Now remember that the kitty can reach the cake in any of these conditions. It could reach the cake while moving right, while moving left, while going down, or while moving up. Now there is a fairly good possibility that the kitty can only reach the cake when it's moving downwards. There's highly unlikely that it would reach the cake while moving upwards, sideways, leftways, or rightways, right? So, so with that in mind, I'm going to add another conditional logic to the down arrow command, right? Because that's the only condition in which the kitty can actually reach the cake. It has to be going downwards to reach the cake, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back to my controls, and I'm going to insert another if condition. So in this if condition, I'm going to add when touching. So I'm going to take the sensing piece, and I'm saying when touching, and this time instead of sprite 2, I'm going to go with the sprite cake. When touching cake, what do you want it to do? You can make it do all kinds of crazy stuff. You can say woohoo, game over. You can make it great sound. You can say play sound, and it can change the pitch. It can do all kinds of things. So let's say we wanted to start the sound meow once again, and maybe this time it is not really meow. You can also record your own sound if you want to. You can say meow, which is fine. You can increase the pitch of meow um, by 10 or even 20, so it gets louder, right? um, and um, and you can also add something like game over. You can say, ha, finally have my cake. Say, right? And that can last for 2 seconds. So now you see you have added conditional logic to the most the block that really makes sense. So now that we're done, I think our game is pretty much ready. So we can go and start playing the game. For example, The kitty starts off here, and I'm going to take him through the maze. Um, okay, be careful, folks, not to hit the wall, because if it does hit the wall, and if your lines are not straight, like mine are not probably straight, it is going to cause a problem here. So I'm going to take the kitty down this pathway. Oh, um, I gotta move him a little bit this way, and then I'm gonna take him down this tunnel, back down here, back down here, and I think I'm getting him closer to where I want him to be, which is I could take him up here, and now finally the cake. So here we go. Finally get to eat my cake. Game over. There you go. That's all you have to do to make a maze runner game. So enjoy, folks. Enjoy, kids. Have fun. I hope this was an interesting game. And now the challenge I'm going to give you is to add more levels to this game. So every time the cat hits this cake and he has achieved the cake, you may want to reset him back to the starting position, change the sprite altogether, change the maze altogether, and go from level 1 to level 2. And each level you can start adding more complexity into your maze. And so it'll be a cool, fun way to build a game of your own with very little coding. And as you see, there isn't really much code in here. It's really a lot of fun. Kids can freak out and enjoy and have fun and building cool games of your own. Your limitation is your imagination. So do not limit yourself. Be creative. Think hard. Design anything that you think you can. And Sprite is the best place to have a lot of fun. So enjoy, folks. Thanks for watching, and I'll come back again with another interesting video